In a bustling small town in Enugu State lived a family, Chief Okeke. Raphael, the second of three sons, grew up in a family where education was prioritized, but practical skills were valued just as highly. His father, Chief Okeke, ensured that all his sons received a good education, fully sponsoring their primary and secondary schooling. However, after secondary school, he believed it was time for them to become self-reliant and learn a trade. Ben, the eldest, chose to pursue carpentry, learning the craft from a local master carpenter. Meanwhile, Raphael delved into tailoring under the guidance of an experienced tailor in the neighborhood. And Michael, the youngest son, learned plumbing. They all did so well in their various skills. Raphael dreams of emulating his uncle Peter, a wealthy and influential, respectable figure, served as a driving force in his pursuit to success. He envisioned himself commanding the same level of respect and admiration, with people flocking to him just as they did to his uncle. He wanted to further his education to study computer engineering in the university, just to be as successful and educated as his uncle. Raphael was the closest of all his siblings to Uncle Peter. Whenever Uncle Peter visits the village, Raphael would follow him everywhere. Raphael yearned for the kind of life Uncle Peter lived, the one marked by wealth, influence, and universal respect. Meanwhile, his two brothers, having established successful career in carpentry and plumbing, were already financially stable and decided to focus on settling down with their respective partners. Chidi and Michael got married while he remained single. Despite his father's persistence, urging him to follow his brother's footsteps and settle down, Raphael remained steadfast in the desire to pursue further education. After 4 years of working as a tailor, Raphael finally gathered sufficient savings to pursue his dream to further his education. He enrolled in the preparatory classes for the Joint Admission and Matriculation Board (JAMB) and successfully secured admission into Michael Okpara University of Agriculture in Umudike, Abia State, to study computer engineering. This marked the beginning of Raphael's educational journey, a significant step towards realizing his aspiration. Uncle Peter, on hearing this, was overjoyed for Raphael's accomplishment. He extended his heartfelt congratulations and offered unwavering support to Raphael. Uncle Peter's support to Raphael served as a source of encouragement and motivation as he embarked on a new chapter of life. During his first year at the university, Raphael encountered the challenge of juggling both academic studies and school registration due to his late enrollment. He made a decision to prioritize his studies above all else, foregoing participation in various social activities such as the Year One Party, Award Night, Bonfire Night, and other fun activities in school. Raphael devoted all his time and energy to his academic pursuits. After excelling in his Year One first semester exam and earning distinctions, Raphael gained widespread recognition within his classmates. His classmates began seeking him out for guidance, turning to him for tutoring, and as a result of this, he formed new friendship with fellow scholars who shared his enthusiasm for learning. Although Raphael was the most intelligent amongst them, but he gladly shared his knowledge by tutoring people. His university experience became increasingly enjoyable as he embraced friendship in the university, spending quality time with friends, hanging out, and engaging in conversations about various topics like relationship, finance, and education. Raphael's social circle consisted of 3 close friends: John, Chidi, and Kelvin. As time passed, Kelvin and Chidi often visited their girlfriends in the hostel, sometimes accompanied by John and Raphael. With the help of Uncle Peter, who provided him with financial support including monthly allowances, school fees, and accommodation expenses, Raphael maintained a stylish appearance and was well regarded amongst his peers. Uncle Peter's pride in Raphael's academic achievement knew no bound, as he spared no effort in ensuring Raphael's success. In his 300 level at the university, Raphael crossed paths with Jane, a stunning, beautiful, and tall classmate of his, who joined the school in her second year through direct entry. Raphael had always had a crush on Jane from the very first time he set his eyes on her, but his shyness prevented him from approaching her. However, fate intervened one day when Jane arrived late to lecture. The lecturer scolded her for coming late together with some other students who also came late. In a fit of frustration, the lecturer decided to administer an impromptu test to punish the students. Seeing Jane standing without a seat, Raphael seized the opportunity to offer her a seat beside him. With his assistance, Jane was able to comfortably take the test and perform very well. When they were done with the test, the lecturer collected it and continued with his teaching. When the lecture ended, Raphael followed the lecturer immediately to help carry the test script. He was the assistant course rep of his class. Jane waited for him to be back, approached him and thanked him for his help in the test, that if not for him, she wouldn't have written anything. Raphael was captivated by her beauty and stared at her, lost in thought. Her voice sounded like music to his ears and her beauty was infectious. Jane had to tap him to bring his mind back, and he replied, "Oh, it's nothing. I'm glad I could help." She thanked him again and left. Jane Okonedo was one of the most beautiful girls in the Department of Computer Engineering. Very fashionable, rich, and flashy. Everyone in her class noticed her because of her courage and beauty. For an engineering student to be this beautiful, she captured the eyes of many in the department, both her colleagues, senior colleagues, and other students. Jane would enter into a class and all eyes would be focused on her. She dragged attention to herself, and that was one thing Raphael found interesting about her. He likes it when people are respected for one thing or the other, just like his Uncle Peter, who is respected by many because of his wealth. One evening in the hostel, Raphael and his three friends were chatting and he recounted the incident with Jane approaching him to express gratitude for helping her with the test. His friends showered him with praises, asking him if he got her contact, but he replied no. His friends were so disappointed, telling him that was the best time to get her contact, but he said that he didn't want it to look as if he did that because he needed her number. He told his friends to calm down and watch, that he would be friends with her. One fateful day in school after class, Raphael was running about with his course rep Michael, doing some departmental things. Some of their classmates came to check the results in their lecturer's office, and Jane happened to be one of them. Raphael and Jane couldn't get their eyes off each other. She checked her results, they were not all that good, but they were no failure. On a Saturday morning, Raphael got a call from his Uncle Peter's son, informing him of his uncle's present predicament. Uncle Peter had been ill for some days now, and he had been hospitalized, battling with his health. It was a shocking news to Raphael, knowing how strength-filled his uncle is and how he was intentional about his health. He wondered the kind of sickness that would make his uncle hospitalized for days. He wasn't himself on hearing the bad news. It weighed him down. On a Monday morning, he wasn't able to attend lectures because he wasn't in the right frame of mind. He had just spoken to his uncle's wife and she didn't sound well at all. He took out time to pray to God to lay his healing hands on his uncle, a man whom he admired a lot and loved so much, a man behind his success. Jane observed Raphael's absence from school while his friends were present. She was concerned about him. This was the first time he is missing class. She wanted to inquire about his well-being from his friend, but she didn't know how to go about it. That evening, while she was home, she couldn't shake off her thoughts about Raphael. She was so worried about him. The next day at school, when Raphael showed up for lectures, Jane felt relieved and glad to see him. She thought he wouldn't attend lectures after missing the first lecture. After the lectures were over, Jane approached Raphael, expressing her concern about his absence from school the previous day and inquiring about his well-being. Raphael was surprised to know that she noticed his absence from school. He was happy to know that she showed concern. He explained to her that he felt sick that day and that he's getting better. Jane asked if that was his first time of falling sick because this was the first time of him missing class, teasing him that the sickness must be a very serious one. That really cracked Raphael up. He appreciated her for her concern and asked how she was doing. Jane asked for his contact so she could reach out to him, and he gave her his contact and collected hers. When Raphael got home that evening, he was super excited, but it didn't really tell on him because he had other worries. But within him, he was so excited. Meanwhile, Jane reflected on their interaction at school, reminiscing about how she managed to make him laugh and admire his calm and sweet demeanor. She pondered whether his outward kindness truly reflected in his character, especially considering his reputation as the brightest student in school, which she really admired. Jane and Raphael got chatting that evening. They really enjoyed each other's company online. They continued like that every day, both in class and at home. They communicated often. After a few weeks of their friendship, Raphael asked her out, and she accepted. They both started a relationship. Raphael told his friends about it and they were super happy and surprised for him. They wanted to know the full gist. Raphael visited Jane in her apartment sometimes since she stayed alone in a big apartment outside campus. They were so in love. Raphael helped her in her studies. They studied together and sometimes he stayed in her place for some weeks, which was her idea. This was Raphael's first relationship. He tried to be the best boyfriend he could. He buys her gifts, sometimes cooks for her in the hostel and brings for her. He made sure he always put a smile on her face. Jane, on the other hand, had been in relationships. Raphael was her fourth boyfriend. They spoke about their past relationship and she was surprised to know that she was Raphael's first love. She felt so special in his life and he never took her for granted. Raphael was so intentional about Jane. He loved her so much that everyone in their class knew they were in a relationship. He would keep seat for her in class, help her write her notes, do her assignments, get handouts for her, buy her lunch, and carry her bag for her sometimes. He really pampered her, and she got so used to it. Raphael's friends spoke to him on where to draw the line in his relationship so as not to be taken for granted after what they saw when they were together walking home. One day, Raphael and his girlfriend were walking home with their friends when she ran into a male friend. She became very excited and spent quite some time chatting with him, leaving Raphael and their friends waiting in the sun. When she finally returned, she asked Raphael to go home and she said she would call him later because she and her friend were going out. Raphael was unhappy about what his girlfriend did because they had plans together, but he obeyed her request. After their exams, everyone traveled, including their friends. Raphael planned to travel to Lagos to visit his sick uncle, but his girlfriend insisted he stays with her at school since she wasn't planning to travel. Against his will, he decided to stay just to keep his girlfriend company. Even when his uncle called him to come visit, he made excuses to appease his girlfriend. During their stay together, Jane's actions bothered Raphael deeply. She would leave him alone in her room for days to visit friends, which happened twice. This behavior pushed Raphael to speak up for the first time, raising his voice to express his frustration with his girlfriend's action. He reminded her that he stayed back in school because of her, yet she would leave him for days to visit friends. This confrontation was the first for Raphael and it surprised Jane. She apologized and promised it wouldn't happen again. After the heated moment, Raphael calmed down and realized he overreacted. He apologized to his girlfriend for raising his voice, and they resolved their disagreement. The next day, Raphael's father called him, asking when he would return home since their school was on break, and when he would visit his uncle. However, Raphael kept making excuses. After the call with his father, he asked Jane why she didn't want to go home, and she said that she didn't want to be apart from him for too long. Despite Raphael's effort to persuade her to travel for at least 2 weeks so he could visit his family, she insisted on staying. Raphael had to comply with her wish, and he communicated with his uncle and parents over the phone since he couldn't visit them. During their stay together in school for their break, Jane could no longer resist her sexual urge. Raphael was a believer of abstinence. He always resists his girlfriend's advances. However, this time, her refusal to speak to him pushed him to reconsider. Concerned about the state of their relationship and unable to bear the silent treatment, he gave in to her request, despite feeling unhappy about it. That was the only way he could keep his relationship going. Raphael invested a lot in his relationship. He made numerous sacrifices for his girlfriend, driven by the love he had for her. However, he eventually realized that his efforts were not reciprocated. This realization dawned on him when her father summoned her for a family reunion. She began preparing and asked that he wait for her until she gets back. She was so inconsiderate. Raphael became furious, expressing his frustration and lack of consideration. He reminded her of the times he postponed his own plans to accommodate her, including staying for her when his uncle was sick and delaying his visit to his parents. Despite their arguments that day, Jane traveled the following day to Lagos without even considering her boyfriend's feelings. Raphael prepared the following day to go visit his uncle. He received a call that fateful day that his uncle had passed away the previous day. Raphael was shattered. He cried and cried, and there was no one to console him. He was alone, in pains. He couldn't believe that his uncle is gone. He wished he had gone to visit his uncle since the time he called. He blamed himself so much and he hated himself for not seeing his uncle. He was frustrated. He didn't know what to do. He was so sad for days. No calls from his girlfriend because she was still upset with him. After a week, he decided to travel to the village to go see his parents. It was a sad one for the family. Their uncle was buried, and he stayed back in the village until school resumed. It was already their 400 level in school. They had all returned to school. Jane visited Raphael, offering her condolence for the loss of his uncle. However, she quickly picked up a fight with him for not calling her during the holidays. Raphael tried explaining to her about his emotional state that made it difficult for him to reach out, and he apologized to her for not staying in touch. Raphael had already made up his mind to end things with his girlfriend since he felt unloved and neglected in their relationship. After some days, he visited his girlfriend in her house, pouring out his feelings and expressing his desire for a breakup. Surprisingly, Jane agreed without hesitation, showing no remorse for her actions. This unexpected response left Raphael stunned, realizing her true nature and her pride, which he had overlooked in their relationship due to the love he had for her, even though his friend had warned him about it. He left her room and went to his hostel. He cried and cried that night, realizing that he didn't get to see his uncle before his demise because he wanted to please his girlfriend. He took it as part of life and a lesson to learn. Raphael and Jane lived their lives without each other. Raphael decided to love his book only until he was done with school and has made something good out of his life. This was his uncle's advice to him. After they were done with school, Raphael decided to go to his uncle's house. His uncle's wife had already called him to come stay with them when he finishes university. Jane and Raphael served in Lagos, finished their youth service, and Jane started working in her father's company, calling the shots. While Raphael, on the other hand, had no good paying job. He had to do all sorts of menial jobs just to make ends meet. As there were no jobs out there for him, he went for interviews. He wasn't called back. One particular day, he got a call from Chidi, It was a very long time they spoke together. They were so happy on hearing each other's voices. Chidi told him how God has blessed him and asked what he is doing now. But Raphael told him he hasn't gotten a job yet, that things are really hard for him. Chidi told him about a vacancy in Trust Group and Company, that he should go there for the interview. He thanked his friend so much for the information. It was already the day for the interview. Raphael prepared and went for the interview. When it was his turn to be interviewed, to his greatest shock, the interviewer was Jane, his ex-girlfriend. It was as though the ground should open and swallow him. He couldn't believe his eyes. He meeting his past face to face. He acted like he didn't know her and he greeted her formally. Jane kept on staring at him till she got a hold back of herself. She conducted the interview and stated that they would get back to him. Jane went home that evening feeling so guilty. The thought of everything she did to him really broke her. Raphael, on the other hand, beat himself so hard for going for the interview because seeing her brought back old memories. He was still hurting and couldn't control his anger. After a week, he got a call from the company that he should resume work on Monday. He didn't know how to feel. Jane, on the other hand, thought he wouldn't resume, but he did resume. He needed the job badly, not for anything else but for himself, since it was a good paying job. After a month of working in the company, Jane was battling with the guilt. He never spoke to her at all. She felt so bad and forgotten. On a Saturday morning, she decided to go visit him in his house. She went through his CV and got the address to his house. She went to his house, and to his greatest surprise, it was Jane. "What are you doing here?" he asked. She came in and went on her knees, begging him for forgiveness. Raphael couldn't hold it. "Get out of my house," he said. Jane pleaded, saying she won't leave until he forgives her. Raphael didn't know what to do. Jane kept on pleading and pleading, owning up to her wrongdoings. After everything she said, he decided to forgive her since they were all in the past. He offered her a seat and they had a conversation. She showed him the chain he got for her while they were still dating. She had never removed it. She had always had it on because she still loved him. She only accepted the breakup because she felt hurt and was used to being pampered by him. She thought he was going to come back to her, but he never did. She asked him for forgiveness for being so inconsiderate. That alone brought back the affection he had for her. He couldn't admit it, but he still loved her. He tried to fight it. Jen kissed him and said, "I still want us back together, and I promise I have grown and I'm a better person now. I will be the best girlfriend you would ever wish for." Raphael was silent for a while, and she thought his silence meant he is done for good. She broke down in tears, about to leave, and he dragged her back, saying, "I love you, and I've always loved you." She was so shocked to hear that. She immediately went on her knees, cried, and couldn't stop thanking him. Raphael pulled her up and hugged her tightly, telling her that we all make mistakes and we learn from our mistakes. He promised her his undying love for her. She was so grateful to him for accepting her back once again. They dated for a few months, and indeed, Raphael really saw changes in Jane. Thank you so very much, guys, for watching. Hope you enjoyed this beautiful story. Please do also like the video, share the video, and subscribe to Substance TV. See you all in my next video. Until then, stay splendid.